Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Aldridge, and I am a program manager on the Azure Bastion team. I'm joined with my colleague today, Ankur, who's going to be doing some demos for you later. I'm really excited today to walk you through Azure Bastion and outline how there's some new features in preview and in GA that we're excited to announce that'll really piece together this idea of secure and robust remote connectivity for different enterprise applications. So here's a quick overview about what we're going to be looking at today. I'm going to start with an understanding of what Azure Bastion is. And so I'll take you through an overview of what the service does, how it's enabling remote RDP and SSH connectivity for different enterprises. We'll then look at some new capabilities that we have with the GA of the standards queue. And so specifically, we're going to look at some infrastructure scaling capabilities. From there, we're going to be talking about VNet peering support and how that really pieces together this idea of a global footprint where Azure Bastion is able to manage connectivity. From there, we'll talk about a really exciting feature called IP-based connection. This is going to highlight how Bastion is actually able to extend outside of an Azure virtual network into on-premises and other non-Azure networks. And then from there, I'll talk a little bit about native client support, which is a really cool feature that customers are able to take advantage of. And then Ankur, I'll transition to him, and he can provide a demo that will really wrap everything together. So let's go ahead and get started. This is Azure Bastion. So there's a few things to note to start. First, Azure Bastion is a fully managed remote RDP and SSH connectivity as a service. The really cool thing about Azure Bastion, there's two things I want to highlight. One, it's natively in the portal. So the idea is customers are deploying application VMs globally in different Azure regions that are serving different purposes. Customers, enterprise users, IoT administrators can log into the Azure portal, and from there, really seamlessly and easily connect to these VMs via RDP or SSH natively in the browser. The other real value of Azure Bastion is that it minimizes the public IP exposure. In a world where enterprises are not leveraging remote jump box services, they're having to expose public IP addresses throughout the network to enable connectivity to those application VMs. The magic with Azure Bastion is there's one public IP address exposed on the Bastion host. And then as enterprises deploy application VNets, applications and local VNets or peered VNets, Azure Bastion is able to manage connectivity from there and provide that service. So what I want to do now is take you from left to right and outline how a user would leverage Bastion to connect to the application. And so on the left side, you have the user. They are logging on to the Azure portal. They are using a client machine. It can be a desktop, be a laptop, whatever that machine is, and they're going to portal.azure.com. From there, they're able to navigate the different VMs or VMSS instances that they're trying to access, and they can click Connect with Bastion. At that point, once that experience is initiated, the user is connecting to the Azure portal via their web browser. The web browser is then establishing a connection to Azure Bastion to the public IP address. The great part about this is from there on out, once users are connecting to different applications, Bastion is managing all of that in the backend using that private IP connectivity. So what I'm trying to show you here, like we mentioned at the beginning, is really two things. One, Azure Bastion is native in the portal. It's a seamless experience. It's easy for customers to be able to navigate to different application VMs natively in the portal. And then second, it really minimizes that exposure of public IP addresses, which is critical as enterprises continue to shift more resources to Azure. So now I want to take a look at the new capabilities that we're announcing with Azure Bastion. So there's a couple to highlight here. First, I want to talk about some features we're excited to announce as generally available. First is the Azure Bastion standards queue. With this standards queue, we're announcing infrastructure scaling capabilities and robust monitoring and alerting with Azure Monitor. In addition, there's also some connection troubleshooting experience native in the portal. If customers want to try to understand if Bastion has visibility or has access to a VM, we're able to show that natively in the portal. And then additionally, VNet peering support is something we've supported for a while. The reason I'm bringing it up here again is it pieces together that idea of global connectivity that I'm going to continue to talk about throughout the presentation today. Additionally, there's some excited preview features and even coming soon features that we're excited to announce. One of those is going to be IP-based connection. This is by far one of my favorite features, and I'm going to deep dive into this in a little bit. IP-based connection, it allows Bastion to extend outside of the Azure virtual network. And then additionally, native client support is something we're really excited to talk about. This is something that's going to be coming soon, but I'm happy to share a few details today as we do a deep dive into what Azure Bastion looks like. So let's go ahead and start with infrastructure scaling. Azure Bastion is an example of what we call a hosted on behalf of resource. What that means is customers and enterprise users are deploying Azure Bastion to their Azure subscriptions in their virtual networks associated to a subnet and a network that they own. When that happens, Microsoft manages the infrastructure that's running the Bastion service. And so what infrastructure scaling allows is it allows customers to really take advantage of the platform as a service or the scaling capabilities that are native to cloud platforms and cloud services. When we first announced Bastion, the infrastructure was more or less fixed. So as customers deployed Bastion and then as adoption or use of Bastion increased, you could think about more applications being accessed over Bastion or even the sessions themselves becoming more intense with more computationally intensive workloads. The infrastructure of the Bastion resource was starting to be a constraint and even a bottleneck in some scenarios. So customers are coming to us and saying, hey, I love this service. I love the seamless access. I love that it minimizes the public exposure of IPs. And I'm not able to actually scale this to meet the different enterprise needs I have. So with infrastructure scaling, we announce a capability where customers are able to scale the virtual machines that Microsoft is hosting to enable additional concurrent RDP and SSH connectivity. Like I said, the real benefit of the cloud is the ability to scale. If a holiday season is approaching and a retail company needs to increase the capacity to serve that workload, they can do this now with Azure Bastion. Alternatively, if it's maybe a slow time during the year and a customer needs to save on costs and scale down, they can scale down the VMs that are facilitating the Bastion connection to save on that cost, and they can maintain that full flexibility. Next, we're going to talk about metrics, monitoring, and alerting. We cannot offer scalable features and the ability for a customer to scale the infrastructure unless we're exposing detailed, granular metrics, monitoring, and alerting that a customer can enable. Azure Bastion is fully integrated with Azure Monitor. So as customers are scaling out the infrastructure, maybe they're scaling from 10 to 20 instances, maybe 40 down to 20 instances, we can now show them the different sets of CPU utilization. We can show them memory usage. We can show them the availability, the performance, and the saturation of the infrastructure that's facilitating their service. And so what we've noticed really with cloud services is that as customers are adopting and moving more applications and more mission-critical workloads to the cloud, the need for robust metrics, monitoring, and alerting is a critical ask. Next, we're going to talk about VNet peering. And so this is where we're going to start to piece together that idea of global connectivity. What VNet peering enables is this idea of that global connection that Bastion is able to facilitate to different application VMs. VNet peering fundamentally enables enterprises to leverage a hub and spoke architecture. Within a hub and spoke architecture, the main idea is enterprises are able to centralize security functions, can be a third-party NVA firewall, maybe a first-party Azure firewall. If there's any hybrid network connections like ExpressRoute or VPN, the gateways for those services are housed and deployed to this virtual network. That's the hub. And now Azure Bastion is able to be deployed in this central hub as well. The main idea with the hub and spoke architecture and what this feature allows for Bastion is as customers are sending application traffic to Azure or accessing applications in Azure, that traffic transits the hub before it reaches any application spoke VNet. So the idea is all centralized management security functions sits in the hub. As customers deploy and manage additional applications in Azure, they add applications to already existing networks or they peer additional networks, increasing the footprint and how applications are being served in Azure. So with VNet peering, it allows a single deployment of one Bastion to manage connectivity to all applications. In this diagram right here, you can see there's two separately peered VNets. Bastion is deployed in the hub network, and if customers want to connect via RDP to some applications or SSH to some applications, they're able to deploy that one Bastion and have Bastion manage connectivity. As new VMs are added, as new virtual networks are peered, Bastion participates in the native VNet routing and is able to connect to the private IP address of those virtual machines as customers manage and deploy those. Next, we're going to take a look at IP-based connection. And like I said at the beginning, this is one of my favorite features. Currently today, Azure Bastion is able to facilitate global connectivity within Azure networks. What IP-based connection allows is it extends Azure Bastion's connectivity to on-premises or even to other cloud provider networks. So what this really enables is if a customer is running a multi-cloud strategy, they can have on-premises there as well, but if they have certain things on-premises, certain things in other networks, other cloud provider networks, as long as there's a hybrid connection between these networks to the Azure Bastion subnet, Bastion can manage connectivity to different applications. This is something that Ankur is going to demo a little bit later, but the main focus here is that customers are able to input the private IP address of an application VM From there, Bastion can manage connectivity as long as that network connectivity is present. Next, we're going to look at native client support. And this is going to be a fairly high-level slide, but the main idea here is as we've been developing Bastion and trying to progress the service, meet different enterprise needs, we've noticed that some customers have very specific needs and requirements that are currently functions of the native clients that they're running. And so the approach we're taking here is as we continue to develop features natively with Bastion, as Bastion's able to serve connectivity via the Azure portal seamlessly, we also, with this feature, are enabling customers with Azure CLI to allow Bastion connectivity to be done via a native client. So customers are able to use a native RDP and SSH client, whatever they have configured already. Maybe they're using it on premises or in other scenarios. They can now run Azure CLI commands to allow Bastion to enable that connectivity. So at this point, I know we've been through a lot. The main idea of what I wanted to walk you through was this idea of Bastion being able to securely manage global connectivity in Azure networks and on-premises and also in other networks that customers may be managing. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Ankur, and he's going to walk us through a demo of what we just talked about.
Thank you for that introduction, Michael. Hi, I'm Ankur Hayatnagarkar, a senior developer in the Azure Bastion team. With the introduction of standards queue, we want to introduce a lot of cool features. So without further ado, let's get straight into it.
The setup for the demo is as follows. We have a virtual network with a Bastion host deployed in it. This virtual network is then connected to the on-prem virtual network via a virtual network gateway. The on-prem virtual network has one virtual machine, the on-prem -VM. This has an IP address of 10.8.0.4. The Bastion virtual network is also peered to a virtual network spoke, which has two Linux virtual machines deployed in it, the Linux RDP VM and Linux RDP port VM. Now, let's jump into the fun part. As you can see, the IP address of the on-prem virtual network virtual machine is 10.8.0.4. To connect to this, after you have enabled the IP-based connection feature on your Bastion host, a new blade, the connect blade, should show up. To connect, all you need to do is enter the IP address of the virtual machine to connect to, which in this case is 10.8.0.4, and select SSH since it's a Linux machine. Enter your username. You can save your SSH private key in Key Vault, which is what I have done here, and click on Connect. And as you can see, we are connected to the virtual machine. With the standards queue of Bastion, we also allow customers the ability to select a custom protocol and port for their connections, which now allows us to RDP into Linux machines, provided the machine has already been set up with an RDP server. Let's see this new feature. I have set up an RDP server on the Linux RDP VM, which is in the VNet spoke. When we try to connect with the standards queue of Bastion, we also get the option to select the connection settings, which allows us to customize the protocol and port. Selecting the RDP protocol automatically changes the port to the default RDP port. As you can see, after entering the credentials and clicking connect, we are now able to RDP into the Linux machine. Another method of securing your virtual machines further is to change the default RDP and SSH port that is used to connect. With the standards queue of Bastion, we also allow connections on non-standard ports. The Linux RDP port VM has been set up with an RDP server on a non-default port of 3380. After entering the correct credentials and the correct port, we are now able to RDP into the new Linux machine with a non-default port.
So these were a few of the cool features which we have introduced with the new Bastion standards queue. Hope you get to try out the new IP Connect feature, the custom protocol, the custom port feature in the upcoming months. And hope this was an informative session. Thank you.
Thank you for the demo, Ankur. I appreciate you all spending time with us today, learning about the new GA and public preview features with Azure Bastion and how it's enabling global and secure connectivity to enterprise customers. Thank you.